Welcome to my post-mortem for my first commercial project, Fujin. First I'll go through what I did and what I learned on the technical side of things. Much too late in the project. I did a lot of uh, asset tweaking and scene generation, as well as the mild interactions and scene transitions. I also polished up Unity's default character controller with a decent first-person controller that had a lot more options and was a lot smoother and more consistent. I don't really like using a rigid body for like a walking sim because you don't want that resistance walking up a hill, and you don't want necessarily to keep sliding or use friction to stop those things. You don't want to rely too much on physics. You want perfect control, which is where the character controller comes in. Um, the character controller doubles as a capsule controller, and I mean a capsule collider, and you can see it there. So if you add one of these and then use mouse look to start your own first-person controller, you're going to have a lot more control over slope and movement and like acceleration here. I would add in deceleration as well, because having acceleration control the speed that you start moving and then stop moving isn't enough control. So that's all I'd add to this script here. The most fun me and my design teammate had was certainly in polybrush texture painting, although it was much too late in the project. Okay, on to project management. This is, I guess, my project plan. It's lacking a bit, but it covers the roadmap of pitching the presentation following our initial lectures and introduction to marketing and commercialization, and goes right to a bit of a promotion plan here. I had a lot of contributors, too many. I thought there's no harm in like more people coming on and doing more animation assets or audio assets, but it was a whole lot of draining work to reply to instant messages to the 10 contributors. Another problem was that the animation and audio students both wanted to do parts of the work in a team, and for contracts it's a little messy because because they'd also wanted to do individual contracts. I had contracted individuals for certain assets, and yet the copyright ownership was a little bit messy because they'd worked on all of those assets in a team, and so it was almost arbitrary to split them up. In hindsight, if they were all going to work closely together, I would have done like a single contribution contract for like the team lead of each team, but there was no team lead for animation, and there was a little more involvement from different audio students at different times. So you got to do one or the other. You've got to either do individual contracts and clearly spell out that they need to have the copyright ownership, even if they had someone help them, that they're going to own that thing that they make and give to me because I need to know that before I distribute it. Or you talk to them as a team and you ask them if they want to figure it out amongst themselves in the future as they go, and just do a team contract that one person is responsible for delivering and distributing or passing on the distribution rights for. Considering they all became a bit split up anyway, I think in this case I would have pushed the individual thing a lot more. So I've learned on this project that I work best with more assertive people that will really engage in the process with confidence. And now that I'm almost finished my degree, uh, having that choice, like in teammates, is more relevant. On the note of collaboration or preferred collaboration, I want to say I've also learned that it's really important that you accept responsibility for your own behavior and that you don't let the behavior of others affect your work to the best of your ability. I talked about that in my ethics blog. It's one of my um, points on my code of ethics that I do my best to not let the behavior of others affect mine, but I also must accept responsibility when my like poor language adversely affects someone else. So instead of just labeling people as sensitive or myself as insensitive, I need to accept and acknowledge feedback um, of my behavior and give it serious consideration. So acknowledge means to let them know that I hear them and that I'm doing my best and that I meet them well. We didn't have a creative lead or a project manager in the first 3 or 4 weeks of the project, which is really, really bad. I should have known better, but I'm learning still. I thought with just one other team member we could be more relaxed, but we were both kind of like, "What do you want to do? I don't mind what I do. I'll do whatever you don't want to do." We're both like that, trying not to step on each other's toes, which is really silly. We really need to have defined roles. You need a PM and a creative lead. They don't have to be the same person, but they need to be solid roles. Like you can get to the vision, the creative vision of the game together with your whole team, but like the vision holder then at one point in production needs to be firm and really confident in their role. And the project manager needs to be firm on the deliverables and take a hard stance. Something I didn't do, but you should always do, I know they do it in Final Project, is Hawkeye charts. Hawkeye charts are, if we go to Hack and Plan, if I were to post the hours that I spent on this milestone, it wouldn't just be to shame everyone else, it would be to keep momentum, to inspire others. You could then look at where other people are falling behind and support them. But this praise for the people that work hard is good for momentum, but for me, like I would have seen that I was spending way too many hours on this. When I was in silly, let's go to the discontinued task tracker. When I was in this, it was a little hard. Like I've got these sums of estimated hours, but it's just so much work to like split them up into milestones and get different sums. When Hack and Plan does it all automatically, it's kind of a no-brainer. Don't do this. There's functions here, there's filters and sorts, but like Hack and Plan does all of this and more in so few clicks. Let's see actually. So if something isn't touched in this milestone, if it's just sitting there and planned, if you finish it, I might do it in this one because my teammate hasn't logged these hours. If I finish this milestone, I can choose to move them to the backlog or move to week 13. I'll do that. And we can go to 13 and they'll be there. That might not be a great idea. It might be better to duplicate them so you can kind of like show what got done compared to what needed to be done in each milestone in your Hawkeye chart. Another thing I might move to Hack and Plan are actually the deliverables, because these weren't updated. So, and people would do the things they wanted to do, low, medium priority. Just like the carrot on the stick with Polybrush, if I had split up the milestones into, as I discussed in my last video, and I probably talk about more in the future, if I'd split the milestones into user stories, that is like snippets of gameplay that are an important part of the experience during the prototype, production stage, the things that are important to each user experience can be prioritized in the asset list. And so I could have task dependencies in Hack and Plan or Trello that don't give people the option to choose the order, and if they don't do it from start to finish and log those hours, then they won't be able to show off their progress in the Hack and Plan. I think I've been way too relaxed and laid back in my project management, or perhaps I just demand the best of myself and everyone else. It can certainly be a lot better because I had a lot of people and I have a lot of assets. If we look at these, aren't even all the models because a whole lot went in last minute, but these are most of the models that the animators did, and there's heaps and heaps of audio and a few really good music tracks. And on a positive note, working in the studio with the audio students, I wasn't really limiting them or asking anything pedantic, but it was just inspiring for them to have me there, listening to stuff, saying that's really cool. Maybe we could think about doing this as well in the future. Or here's some ideas for some of the assets we haven't finished yet, or that noise in the background of the road that you've recorded. Like that road actually sounds like a bit of a waterfall, so maybe we could, instead of stressing about denoising it, use that in like a waterfall scene. Perhaps on the visual side of things, I was a bit too involved with the collaborators. My instant messaging chat is just a whole lot of pictures of me sharing my style tests, trying to get my design team members' opinion and some feedback from the animation contributors. But everyone, because although I was insistent mid-project that my team member be creative lead, because there was no real solid like creative lead responsibility, I was kind of wasting my time. Like I should have just picked the first thing I thought was unique and made as much game as possible, and then played with it all once it was all together. Because like screen effects and shaders and materials, that's all stuff that can be applied uniformly to an entire game project. So if we look at my images folder, it's not even half of it. Pinterest is the real. There's some, but so much of it's on Pinterest, which I haven't talked about yet, and it was really good, so I'm going to go there. Although Pinterest was really good for inspiration and references and collaboration, it wasn't, I don't think it was used very well. I didn't have solid references. People kind of took their pick, and maybe it's just in my eyes, but a lot of the style was mismatched, and I was constantly communicating, like for example, the rules in Shinto architecture, which was an important design consideration that my teammate really wanted to push for that kind of mystical Zen aesthetic. In the future, I would certainly use Pinterest, but I would have a board like this for inspiration and clearly mark it as inspiration that everyone adds to and talks about very early on. And if people aren't involved in it, well, that's too bad, because then the next board would be references, and the board would have a section, just like this whole project board has these sections, but like the board for references would have a section for each asset name, and that would be linked to the Trello or Hack and Plan task that they've got set to make that asset. And even if I'm by myself, this is what I'm going to do, because my images folder on my computer is huge now, because a lot of my screenshots were PNGs. And this is just good to have anywhere that you've got internet. You don't need storage. So although style is really important for branding, and having something unique and consistent helps with that. I fixated way too much on that instead of moving the project along and accepting quality. I think I would have been less likely to fixate on things like art direction and the quality of the design itself, the documentation, and yeah, all the things. If instead I'd embraced the importance of like the PM role and getting better at that, I would have been able to focus on improving on that as I went instead of like I watched a few GDCs a few weeks ago um, that helped a lot. These are screenshots from a GDC on conflict resolution in small indie teams. So I thought that was really helpful for me, and it basically covers like the process of meetings and resolving any conflict, and that is with the project, and that is that you remember that it's about the project and that solutions that are pitched by people need to be done so without ego, and the whole team um, is is responsible for like molding that solution, and for offering other solutions potentially if they can't mold it into something they think is the best thing. But you basically you all get to a point where you're happy with like combined ideas on a solution instead of just one person potentially pitching something and other people kind of shuffling their feet, looking at the ground, and not not really liking it, but being too hesitant to say something about that. So you've got like an obligation to not just engage with other people's solutions um, as best you can, but to offer solutions to be molded and engaged with by the team if you don't think it's best. You have no right to be upset like with anything if you don't engage. Um, it also talks about like in a bigger studio you would have like an art lead, an audio lead, and um, I definitely need. This is why I screenshotted this slide. If the solution doesn't work out and you've got to do things last minute, instead of obsessing about all the areas of the project, because a game has many, you rely on your team leaders, or if even if you just have a partner, like if you let them know you're relying on them, that they need to do what they need to do because you don't have time, you're more likely to succeed, and you're less likely to have burnout from one party, and or like the idea that another party isn't like core to the team, isn't feeling they contribute as much as they can. So I want to talk about how I actually went about marketing. I've talked about it before in my indie marketing blog. Uh, I mentioned um, like tweeting stuff and having a Patreon with tutorials, and like sharing your story as a human being and a game developer. This is the first time I've made a Twitter for a game. And it's got a few followers. If I kept at it like beforehand, and I mean like I know we only had a few weeks and this is just a demo, but the idea is you keep the development progress updates going like a year before the launch, like the whole year. Plenty of time to build up that followers list. If I can get this many in a couple of weeks, I can't imagine how many I'd get tweeting like indie game and game dev hashtags for a year. So even though that's tiny, get your friends and family to retweet it, and obviously the collaborators. I mean that's part of my plan actually. I asked in a few IMs and for my design teammate, I asked if they could retweet when I posted the demo. Oh, if you didn't realize, this is my personal itch, but because I've made myself an admin, you can see something by the team name. Um, and thank you to my lecturer Adrian for recommending that if you've got a paid game, you should put in tagline that there's a free demo available. I didn't really see an increase in traffic, but it's a really good idea. Um, I only thought to do it way after the initial traffic had tapered off. Our team name is Felled Earth, and it kind of alludes to some of the messages that I like to put into my games, and that is that, like humans, can choose to or choose to not completely destroy the planet. I think it's subtle enough to not be like really preachy and pushy. Uh, so I've chosen to have like um, I just made empty zip files and then uploaded them, and you've got the option to make them a pre-order file. So it's just a placeholder, and you can update the upload as long as it's got the same name. It'll update the placeholder files that you've got there, and then that's obviously separate to the demo download. But I think this is really cool that it lets you do this. I've done a demo update because there was a bug. I think there was a coroutine being called instead of no, a method was being called instead of a coroutine. So of course there's no errors. Added a last minute audio track to the main menu and fixed some materials. I'll keep doing these demo updates because like it's a thing that followers will see in their feed, that the thing is being worked on, that it is worth money if there is people putting time in it. It's just the same as Twitter. Although Fujin wasn't exactly a commercial success, it doesn't really matter if it was for a student project. It got sales, and I'm pretty sure one of them was by, uh, I think it's Nathalie Lawhead. She makes anatomically incorrect dinosaurs, which I thought was such a hilarious game, and obviously quite a following. So I thought that was pretty cool. That like a really arty indie dev um, followed the project. At the very least, I couldn't find an owner to the email by googling it, but it was exactly the same time that I got to follow, so chances are high. We always knew our audience wasn't going to be traditional gamers, so I think even if I hadn't specified we were targeting like art indie devs, they kind of are the like art game community. So I feel like we successfully targeted the market, no matter how small that market was. So in summary, the biggest recommendations I can take away from this project, in no particular order, are probably really defining the roles and making sure everyone's confident and comfortable in those roles, right from the get-go. Uh, Task dependencies are super important because it lets you hang the fun stuff like a carrot above yourself, like not just others. You can't trust yourself as much as anyone else. It's the problem. I spent way too long on the technical stuff that was not important because that's what I really enjoy, as well as documentation. But unfortunately, I also fixated on my teammate adding to the documentation of a quality that I shouldn't expect everyone to adhere to. I will think of milestones for a project instead of weeks or prototype and delivery. I'll think of milestones as an experience that we're presenting to the consumer or the customer, and that makes it even easier to market because at the end of each milestone you can have like a task that's like, now tweet the GIF of the thing that we worked on this week. I have to think more about my language and people's sensitivities. Um, I think this last year has been good because I've been working at the lab where I'm surrounded by other Aspies. I found it really easy to accept my flaws and strengths because like you celebrate the strengths as well as accepting and acknowledging the flaws, and that's what makes us unique after all. I've been reminding everyone to like take what I say with a grain of salt and to hit me up if I even nearly offend them, just to help me out with the language choices. So I just got to continue assuring my goodwill and um, making sure people are really comfortable addressing me. I really don't want to sound like an asshole, but I have to accept that I can, even if it's accidentally, I can come across that way. I need to acknowledge how people feel. I need to let them know that I hear them. That's the best I can do. I need to take on way less contribution. I think I could be a good PM. It's just really hard if it's a giant team and I'm completely drained by communicating with a ton of people at once. By not taking a hard stance on meetings and deliverables, I was kind of left having one-on-ones with everyone all over the project, which was so inefficient for me. In the future, like, people have those deliverables, will have those Hawkeye charts, and if people really aren't making deliverables milestone after milestone, that they'll be performance managed out basically. Instead of letting people push me for each milestone like week after week, um, if I take a hard stance, and then people can sort themselves out if their contract is in jeopardy, if they're not going to get any money, for example. Not that there was much money on this project, but there could be. Again, I need to remember that solutions are for the project. They're not owned by individuals. They're not worse or better if different individuals have them. Any idea can be good. It just needs to mold into a cohesive shared solution for any project issues. Okay, in the next video I'll talk about a little plugin we got off the Unity Asset Store for generating heat maps so that we can assess where the player's gone and potentially what they've been looking at in a scene.